look at that.
Drop stitch alert. This is my one, but you don't like it anyway.
For the mother, so it's astonishing, really, that she managed to deliver 7 children. Oh, crumbs, it's rubbish.
You know, I don't particularly like knitting Let Lopey, and Dan loves it. You know, we're different, aren't we?
You hate knitting with Let Lopey. Drop stitch.
Yeah.
I don't think that'll pull all the way.
It will.
Okay. I fix it. Look.
And yes, I know I look like Charlie from Clarkson's Farm, but I am going to take this hat off.
Look at the body. I mean, It is just spectacular.
Don't quite know what to expect there.
And then there was another 4. Oh, no, I'm getting confused. I'm getting in the weeds here.
The scenery.
I'm not very good with bird noises. I've got to de-stress everybody.
I'll sort it out, don't worry.
I'm like...
Welcome, everybody, to the Bakery Bears video show. Yes, we're back with a brand new show. And oh my goodness, thank you all so much for your lovely messages about the last show. The lemon and raspberry coconut crumble cake.
Oh, yes.
It was indeed spectacular. Oh,
It
yes.
was.
We're so glad you enjoyed watching. We hope loads and loads you make it. It's seriously worth it.
Definitely.
I mean, my
wish we
goodness.
still had one.
I know. I mean, sometimes things just come together perfectly.
Yeah.
And that absolutely did.
It did.
And so cool that you'd just, looked at an old recipe and messed with it.
I know.
That's when some of the best things happen.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Oh, my goodness. What a show, though, we have in store for you today.
We do.
Because there is a brand new episode of England, a Castle Nation.
Yeah.
And we are approaching the end of the series.
We are.
I mean, it just seems weird.
2 more after this one, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it just is so weird.
Isn't it? It's crazy.
It feels like 2 minutes since the series started.
It does.
And to think now that we're approaching the end of the story, and what's so exciting for me is I'm sort of treading new ground myself. Because this time, a brand new destination, somewhere we've never actually been to.
No,
And-
I've never been to this. I've been to all the others.
Yeah. What was so strange was it's actually closer than a lot of the places which we've been.
I know. I don't know why we've overlooked it previously.
Well, I'll tell you why.
It's crazy.
No, I'll tell you why. It's because there's no... It's because it's unmanned.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I think a lot of people do this. They look at places to go visit and they look at the ones that are manned with a gift shop and you can buy, a drink and stuff. And loos, actually.
No toilet,
I'm sorry to bring up
loos.
loos.
I know.
But I know that would put a lot of people off.
It would, especially if you've got young children,
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
This place doesn't have any of that. But that's what makes it so special.
Yeah.
There's something else that makes it special. And, how funny it is now that this is 2 episodes in a row where we're going to talk about wildlife.
Wildlife.
Because last time it was oyster catchers.
Oh, that's right.
Do you remember the oyster catcher chasing the drone? I was like completely panicking. This time, I'm not sure if they are I think they probably are kites. But I saw 3 kites. Could be kestrels. You may be able to tell, because have a look at this. The scenery was just spectacular, wasn't it? And that's what makes that part of the world so special. Because it's literally one stop and you're in Scotland, you start to get more of those sort of...
A bit more wild, a bit more rugged.
Rugged looks. Yeah, just the most spectacular
and not
side.
as populated either, not as touristy maybe.
It's just like... I tell you what it is. The thing... which makes Cumbria have more tourists than Northumberland, because, as we know, Northumberland is the least visited of all the counties.
That's right, and least populated as well.
But I think if you took the lakes out of Cumbria, I think Cumbria would, on a part, or could be even less than Northumberland.
Yeah, I agree.
Because everyone passed the lakes.
Everybody when people think of Cumbria, they think of the Lake District, don't they? And everybody goes to the lakes, and I think that means that some other areas are kind of...
Cumbria's a big place.
Oh, it's a big county.
And if everyone is piling to one tiny little area,
it
you're
leaves
exactly
other
right.
areas for us to discover,
Yes.
let's say.
And that's what we're going to be doing today.
Absolutely.
Oh, yes. Neil, what a 2 weeks we've had, because university preparations are progressing apace.
I'm so exhausted. My brain is completely fried.
And you've been doing a mum's advice book.
I haven't really started it yet.
Oh, what a brilliant idea, though.
I bought a really pretty notebook, a moleskin notebook, which has got like sakura flowers on the front of it. I thought, right, I'm going to make Bryony a little sort of book she can go to if she ever needs to answer a question randomly when she can't get hold of us, which in this day and age probably won't happen. But anyway, I just thought I'd fill it with like hints and tips and, what to do with that and what shall I do there and how cleaning and how often should I do that and all stuff around that.
It's such a brilliant idea, and it's going to be treasured. You just
Maybe,
know.
I don't know.
Stop
She
it.
probably won't ever open it.
Are you
will she?
insane?
I don't know. It'll make me feel more sort of...
Well,
I don't know.
It's a brilliant...
Will it? I don't know.
Of course it will. It's a brilliant idea, and it's something that she'll just absolutely treasure. She'll have it in 30 years.
I'll stick in a few recipes, some of the favourite things that she likes to make. I don't imagine she's going to be baking a lot, but certainly she wants to make cupcakes because it's her birthday quite soon after she moves in, within a couple of weeks it's her birthday. I'm sure she'll be the first one in the flat having a birthday, maybe.
Yeah.
So she wants to make cupcakes, so I want to make sure that she's fully prepped for that.
Yeah.
And there's so many things to think about, and honestly my brain feels like it's going to explode. You probably feel the same.
Yeah, definitely.
There's so many little things, isn't there, that as a parent you just do without thinking.
Yeah.
That now she's going to have to do, with thinking, because there's just a myriad.
Yeah.
But I'm
right.
sure it will all be fine. It'll all be fine.
Well, it has been so far, so.
Yeah, everything's been fine. So
Yeah.
everything's fine. It's all fine.
Well, it is. It's all right trying to tell yourself, but it is.
Can you see I'm trying to convince myself? It will be. I know it will
Look,
be.
we have quite the episode in store because, yes, we've obviously touched on England, a Castle Nation, Gunpowder Plot,
It
and
was really fun. I watched it this morning. Excellent. Really enjoyed it.
I mean, I'm such an idiot because I start researching.
Yeah.
I know. I start researching for this series and start researching for this episode. And I didn't put two and two together and realise that it was the Gunpowder Plot that happened during the reign of James I.
Right.
And so it was like, you can imagine my excitement when it suddenly dawned on me. Oh my goodness, because it's such a... I mean, first of all, we're not too far away from that in right now.
We're not.
I mean, really, before you know it, it'll be here.
Remember.
And it's such a key part of... It certainly was when we were young.
Oh, absolutely. Bonfire night. 5th of November. You probably don't know why I just said remember.
The 5th of November.
The 5th of November.
Except I like to mess around with it.
Bonfire night.
I've said before, remember the 1st of September. Now, I told Bryony to tell you something.
Did you?
And she didn't tell you.
Did she not?
Do you know the Earth, Wind and Fire song?
Which one?
Do you remember?
Yeah.
The 21st night of September.
September.
The 21st night of September.
Oh, it's when Bryony starts uni. Right?
Yes.
When we take her to uni.
So Earth, Wind and Fire has been singing about this since the 70s.
It's also the first day of autumn.
Yes.
So all of these stars are aligning.
They are. Speaking of stars aligning, what a show. Lots of projects. So it's
lots
high time.
Lots of projects, lots of things to talk about.
Kay Jones, what's on your needles?
So, right, the first thing I've got to show you is a new pair of socks. Now, can you remember on the last episode in Endy Bits, I just randomly remembered to tell you something, and it was a skein of yarn that I'd got up there that I found. Can you remember?
Yes.
Well, I'm knitting socks with it, and they're fabulous. So this skein of yarn was one that I'd had in my stash since 2016.
That's amazing.
Which I know that I posted on Instagram recently asking people what their oldest yarn was. And some people were saying like 20 or 25 years. And I thought mine was like a long-standing yarn. But yeah, this has been in my stash for quite some time. And This was specially dyed for me, this yarn, by Deb at Fondant Fibre. She doesn't dye currently and hasn't for some time, which is a great tragedy. But she dyed this one for me specially for a design, and it was the ObiwanKnitter shawl, which is a asymmetrical, one of those shawls where you start off with hardly any stitches and just get bigger and bigger, and it forms like an asymmetric triangle. It was Harry Potter themed, obviously, with the name, and I wanted a specific yarn to knit it. It's a 2-colour shawl, and one of the yarns is the one that Deb dyed for me. And I wanted, when I gave her like the brief for the colours, I said to her I want it to look like Fawkes the Phoenix. That was the kind of colours that I wanted, and she absolutely nailed it. And she sent me 2 skeins at the time, because Deb was always incredibly generous with her yarn. Yeah. You know, she would send us yarn all the time. So, I mean, we were so grateful, and I'm still grateful, because now I'm knitting socks with this beautiful yarn. But this one is on her Austin base. Now, her Austin base, I realised, is the same base as that kind of slightly thicker fingering weight that I've discovered recently. And when I realised that it was on this base, I was like, yeah, I've got to knit socks with this. So, and that's what I'm doing. So it's a superwash merino cashmere nylon. I think it must be an 80-10-10, I'm guessing. And it's 350 metres. So this is it in the cake.
I mean, it's just beautiful.
Isn't it lovely? So it's this mix of bright pink and red and yellow, and also like a sort of burnt red going towards brown, as if it's like the embers of the flames, you know, when the phoenix bursts into flames. It's absolutely gorgeous. And although I'd knitted with this before, the shawl is obviously a completely different construction to a pair of socks, and I had no idea how it was going to knit up. I had a feeling it would knit up really lovely, and it is knitting up really lovely. So I finished a sock and I'm on the second one. So here is the first sock, and it's just lovely. You know, the thing, obviously you get some difference in terms of how it's knitting up when I'm working down the gussets here. But generally speaking, it's a beautifully variegated yarn. You know, there's no pooling as, you know, what I would consider pooling. It's just lovely. So for this sock, I cast on 56 stitches using a 2.75mm needle. You know, this way of knitting a pair of socks for me and for Bryony, it's just been a revelation, because 56 stitches knits up so quickly. It's like amazing. I'm so jealous of all the people who have a 56 stitch sized foot, you know, with normal fingering weight. It's just fantastic how quickly they knit up. It's really satisfying. But what I did for this sock is I did 10 rounds of 2x2 rib, and then I thought for a bit of interest, let's put in a broken rib. So I've just done a 2x2 broken rib, which is just 2 rounds plain knit, 2 rounds knit 2 purl 2. And I think it's just a great stitch pattern. It's brilliant for when, you know, say you did have a yarn and you weren't quite sure how it was going to knit up, which is probably maybe why I used this as well. It just gives, because knits and pearls have got slightly different tension, it can break up pooling if it's going to happen, or make your yarn a little bit more variegated, you know. I wouldn't, as it turns out, I wouldn't have had a problem at all. If you look at the foot here, isn't it beautiful how it's knit up here? It's just lovely. You know, I wouldn't have had a problem. But it also makes the sock go quicker for me, putting in a little stitch pattern. And it also makes the second sock quicker, because I can just count repeats. And I find that I really like to count things when I'm knitting. So this way of knitting, the second sock usually for me goes even slightly quicker than the first, because I've got those little targets. So for example, on the leg, I've done 5 repeats, because it's a 4-row repeat. So I can quickly whiz through those 5 repeats, and then I know how many repeats down to the toe, so I can monitor that working down, and it just seems to make everything go so much quicker. So I've done an umbrella toe here and just a standard slip stitch and a French turn. So that's the first sock. And then the second one, I cast this on, gosh, I don't know, last night, the night before, certainly no more than that. And I'm using Addy It says Addy Classic Lace on these. I don't know if this is old packaging, but I'm using these ones. I do like Addy needles for knitting socks. The only thing I do find is that after a while, they smell a bit metally. I think, you know, over time as you use them, I'm wondering if it's sort of, if there's a coating on there or what it is. Maybe that degrades slightly. These ones are okay, they don't smell yet. But I do have a couple of pairs of these that do smell really metally and I can't use them anymore. But they are quite old, I think, those ones. I do use them a lot. So yeah, that's the second sock and I'm, really enjoying them. And these are going to be part of my sock stash for this year. I had a little count of how many pairs I've got and I've got 8 so far in my sock stash. So this will be the 9th. I've got another pair that I'm going to show you that will become the 10th. So I'm really, there's a possibility that I'll have 12 pairs for my sock stash this year, which is just amazing, isn't it? So sock stash, if you're not aware, is a year-long knit-along that we run with our patrons. We did it last year and it was really popular and people wanted it again this year. So we're running it again this year and I can't see why we won't do it again next year because I've enjoyed it so much. I kind of want to do it again. So I think we probably will do that. So yeah, that's those socks. And actually in this bag as well, I've got another skein of this same base that I dyed recently. I dyed up some yarn as a gift to send to a friend. And I wanted to have a skein of the yarn as well. So I threw in one of these skeins, these slightly thicker ones, into the pot when I was dyeing up her skein. And I thought, I'll wind it up because this pair is knitting up so quickly. I would really like to just knit another pair using these slightly bigger needles. I am a bit addicted, you can tell. But this is the skein I dyed up. Isn't it lovely? It's all the pinks because the friend I've sent it to is also a lover of pink. Quite rightly. I mean, really, look at it. It's just fantastic. So I've got this in there so that when I finish this pair, that's ready to cast on. Is pink Halloweeny? I think you can stretch to pink being Halloween.
That pink is.
It is quite Halloween because it's got lots of tones. It's sort of like a Barbie Halloween, isn't it? That's fine. We'll see anyway. So yeah, absolutely loving these socks and I can't wait to have them. I've tried this one on and it's perfection. I cannot wait to wear them. Because it's that slightly thicker fingering weight, it's not like a DK weight pair, nowhere near, but it's just got that added bit of like squishiness and coziness. Fantastic. Oh, sorry. Dan Jones.
Yes.
What's on your needle?
Well, it is, look at the body. I mean, It is just spectacular.
Don't quite know what to expect there.
Well, they're looking at my lovely body. This is the reason why I love knitting these jumpers, because the bodies are so unbelievably textural and the colours are just spectacular. I mean, absolute credit to Lopi.
Yeah, you've done a fantastic job with it.
And the colour work looks just marvellous. And, everything about that experience. So it's finished. Last time you saw this, it was not finished. Now it is finished. And so I'm onto the sleeve. And it's been cool. But then it also hasn't. I'm sat there looking at the sleeve and I didn't know if you'd noticed my mistake.
Oh, you've dropped a stitch.
Yes, I'm tinking back.
You don't need to tink back.
Oh, don't I?
No, I can fix it.
How?
By dropping down and fixing it.
You can drop all that way?
Yes.
And how do you get it to come all the way up?
You use these little strands here in between. It'll look a little bit tighter, but I can fix it.
OK, well, I'll let you have a look. But if it won't work, I'm happy to tink back. So start knitting the sleeve. First of all, great, loving it,
yeah.
Colour work, boom, everything's lovely. Also, doing knit front backs, not left and rights.
Just, you have to make, how many stitches did you have to make? I can't remember. You had to increase, didn't you?
Oh, yeah, but I'm meaning the increase is coming up the sleeve.
Ah, right, you're doing it for that as well.
Yes.
Oh, right, OK.
Yeah.
Because I always get a bit confused because when you do make one left, make one right, you're not using a stitch, are you?
There you are.
No, you're not. You're using a strand in between.
Oh, right, okay. Sorry, I was getting mixed up.
But when you do knit front backs, you're using a stitch, aren't you? I think it would be fine in this instance.
It is fine.
But
I've checked the numbers.
Yeah, if you were doing like a lace or textured pattern,
yeah,
I don't think you could do that.
No, of course not.
Using a stitch, right?
You've got to do what's on the pattern for lace or textured.
Yeah.
But I've checked the numbers and it's working fine,
right, okay.
and it also looks good.
Yes.
I've compared it to other sleeves that I've done, and it looks better, in my humble opinion.
Shall I put it on my little hand?
You can do, but
look at that!
Drop stitch alert. This is my one, but you don't like it anyway because you don't.
I can't wear Let Lopey.
But look,
not like a jumper.
we've spoken about all the good stuff. Now we need to get to the bad stuff because I'm sat there one evening watching Jack Bauer, Year of 24, and I'm looking at the colour work chart for the sleeve. Mm-hmm. And first of all, there's too much information on one chart. It needs just... The whole approach is wrong because it's so complicated. But anyway, found the starting point, knit around the sleeve, and the motif didn't fit.
No.
So I'm like, right, okay, I've messed this up. So I looked back, tinked back, did it again.
You didn't ask me at this point.
No.
You were just trying to fix it. Yeah.
Still, well, yeah. Self-contained knitter and all that jazz. Get round again, still wrong.
Yeah.
So Kay then said, oh, you look a bit perturbed. I said, look at this. We looked at it, spent quite some time working it out. It doesn't fit.
No, not...
We also looked at pictures to clarify that.
I looked at projects online and some you can tell with some of the pictures.
And it doesn't fit.
It doesn't fit.
I mean,
well, some...
it's not offensive.
No.
It's not offensive at all, but... I think it's shoddy.
Yeah, the thing is, right, she's done the same wave pattern that's part of the yoke.
Yeah.
So that makes sense, doesn't it? You want it to match part of the yoke. But because of the stitch count, it doesn't fit into all the sizes.
No.
So all she's done is just cut it off.
Yeah.
So for some of the sizes, it doesn't line up and you get like this jog situation going on.
Yeah.
Now, Dan's going to make sure that that's on the inside of his arm so that you don't really see it.
But anyway, you know, on the positive, it looks okay. On the negative, as a knitter, you want a cohesive, flowing through experience, and the least I would have expected is some form of notification that the motif didn't fit.
It should have said in the pattern, I think, that, you know, for sizes, blah, 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 the motif won't fit fully and you will get a jog. You know, if you'd known about that, you wouldn't have thought that you made a mistake in the first instance. No. You know, the situation with the chart, Dan's right, there was one chart and all of the sizes were on it with, like, lines coming down.
And it's so thin and small.
Yeah, it's a small chart like this and there's loads of, like, information on it. And I
mean, I think my advice to you would be is if you were knitting this, I would probably, if you have the facility, I would photocopy it
and make it a bit bigger.
Yeah. Or I suppose you could take a photograph of it on a device, on an iPad, iPhone, enlarge it, and then as well, you know, it depends how you like to work. I know some people are cool, like using iPads and things. To be honest, I do prefer paper. I don't want to have an iPad out when I'm knitting. I just want it to be. I don't know why I feel all earth child.
I never use devices when I'm knitting.
It's like detox time in a way. So, you know, I really like to have paper.
So do I.
So that's what I would do. I would enlarge it and then, you know, you can then also mark it up. Because I'm, of course, using the book. And you can't really mark up the book. Because if someone else...
Well, no one else is going to want to knit it because I don't want to knit it.
I suppose, but...
But no, I wouldn't write on a book.
Because then it's ruined, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't like writing on books. I would photocopy it and...
It's a minor thing.
Everybody works in a different way, don't they?
It's a really minor thing because I'm loving the project.
Yeah.
I can't wait to have it finished.
It's a great
These sleeves are going to fly off the needles.
Yeah.
Because I'd actually knitted 5...
You worked through it a number of times. It'd probably be up here if...
No, I had knitted further up. I think back at least 4 rounds.
Why didn't you just tell me about the drop stitch? I would have told you not to tink back. Anyway.
Okay. But look, that is... I hadn't told you what the project is. It's the Godi.
Godi.
Yes. And it's lovely. and I'm enjoying it, and the yarn is great. It's let lopey. I'm using my cubics.
This main colour, I think, is called brick red, something like that.
Be about right, I think.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, cool.
Looking great.
What else isn't on your needles?
I didn't say on the last project it was a new cast on.
Thank you very much, caller, for phoning in.
That was the last project.
Wonderful.
Those socks were a new cast on.
Excellent, excellent.
My next project is a new cast on.
Except you pulled it off, so it doesn't count.
It's currently off the needles. However, it will be back on the needles this afternoon. So I think I'm going to count it as on the needles.
You could argue that it's 2 new cast-ons.
It's not, though, is it? It's not.
Well, I think you're being very fair and very generous. So
it's 1 cast-on.
Well, that's fine.
So this next project, yes, it's a new cast-on. It's a hat. And I'm knitting 2 hats, actually. These are going to be gifts for some friends that we're going to be seeing in December. So they'll be Christmas gifts. I wanted to knit them a hat each. I've actually never met these people, but they've been friends of your family and you for decades, haven't they?
Yes.
How long have you known John and Mike?
Since birth.
So probably, 40 odd years.
Probably. I am.
And I've heard Dan talk about John and Mike, all of our relationship, always spoke about them.
Yes.
And
John, they used to come on holiday with us.
Right.
When we were young, and they once came on holiday with us. And I was a very keen sailor when I was young. I used to windsurf, and I also used to sail catamarans and toppers and lasers. And John said, "Oh, would you take me out sailing?" And I went, "Yes, of course, no problem." And everything was fine, and it was all going to be lovely. And then as we're getting in the boat, he says, "It won't tip over, will it?" And I took that as a slight insult, because I thought he was saying that I was such a shoddy sailor that the boat would turn over. And because
he probably wasn't saying it.
No, well, he wasn't. He was genuinely worried about going in the water.
Right.
And because I was 15 and a stupid teenager, what did I then do?
Tip it over.
I deliberately tipped it over. Not once, but 7 times.
Where were you?
We were in Spain in the Costa Brava.
Okay.
I felt so guilty about this for so long that I actually apologised to John about 30 years later. He said, "What are you talking about? I don't even remember." We're going to be seeing them actually in December, which is lovely. We're having a bit of a family sort of get together, and we're going to see them. And I thought, do you know what? I'd really like to knit them each something. So I thought, I'll do them a hat each. That'll be really nice. And you contacted them and asked them what their favourite colours were. And actually said that they both loved blue. I can't remember which way around, but one was navy blue and the other was like a more royal blue. So I thought, right, okay, cool. I'm going to knit them a hat each. So I had some Malabrigo Rios in my stash. And this one is Azul Profundo, which is, I think, one of their most... Sounds like Harry Potter spell.
Azul Profundo. What does that mean? It means something, doesn't it? What's that mean? Spanish. What does that mean?
Profound?
I don't know. Someone will tell us what that means. But it's this gorgeous blue. This is I think it's classed as a worsted weight. Yes, it does say worsted. But then it proceeds to tell you that you get 192 metres for 100 grams. Now that for me is more of a DK. But anyway, this is the colour and it's beautiful. It's gorgeous, isn't it? So I started a hat. There lay the first dilemma, because I trawled through millions of patterns. Because I don't know them, it's difficult, isn't it, to know what to knit when you don't know someone. But my instinct was telling me just to do something classic, So in the end, I thought I'm just going to do bank heads. The bank head hat is one that Dan's knit millions of times. I've knit it a couple of times. It is that classic sort of ribbed pattern by Susie Gawley. So I thought I'm going to do that. So I cast it on, and here is the rib, which you can see is not on the needles. It's a twisted rib. And I was doing the size, not the largest. It's a free pattern, this. So I'm not giving anything away. The largest size, I think, is 110 stitches. I thought I'll do 100 stitches. So I cast this on originally using 4.5mm needles, which is what the pattern recommends. And I thought it's a worsted weight, that should be fine. But I knit a bit of rib and I just didn't like it. It was really, really gappy, really airy. And I think because this yarn is very dense yarn, it's very round and lovely, but it's not very airy. It's quite a dense yarn. It doesn't sort of fill the gaps, do you know, like some yarns do. Quite a smooth yarn, that's what I want to say. It's quite smooth. So I thought, right, I'm going to go down a needle size. So I ripped that off, got 4mm, cast it on and thought, yes, this gauge is much better. And I used the same stitch count thinking it'll be fine, because when I took it off the needles, it did stretch out a lot. And I thought, yeah, it's going to be fine. But as I was knitting the rib, I thought, I don't know whether this is actually going to be big enough. Now I've taken it off the needles and stretched it out, I think it probably would have been. But in any case...
I'm not convinced, Kate.
I don't know. I mean, the thing is, when you don't know someone, I don't know really how big of a head they've got. So, I don't know. You know, it's really difficult, isn't it?
You just want a medium...
Well, this is an adult large. 100 stitches, it says, is an adult large. But I'm so used to knitting hats for you, where it needs to be bigger than that I don't know. And I tried it on my head and it did fit on my head, but it wasn't overly big. And I was like, you know, I was having all of these internal dilemmas. So I said to Dan one night, I was like, do you know what I'm going to do? Because Dan said, oh, have you not got any hat patterns that you've written that would work? And I said, well, I don't really, not for this weight of a yarn. But then I remembered the Angel hat, which is a free pattern of mine available on Ravelry, you know, free of charge. I actually used an Aran weight yarn for that. However, I knit it using 4mm needles with 100 stitches because I really like a dense gauge on a hat. And I thought about that hat and thought the size of it. I thought, you know what, that'd be a good size. So I then ordered some yarn undyed from the supplier that I use, which is Yarn Undyed. I thought, I'm going to see if they've got the same base that I used. So I looked at my pattern, looked at the yardage, looked at the base, checked, and they had an Aran weight yarn with the same yardage. So I thought, this has got to be the same base. Ordered some skeins, dyed it up yesterday, put it on the line, and it's now dry and I'm ready to cast on. So because I thought this will make it a much more personal thing, won't it? If I use yarn that I've dyed, it's my pattern, and then I've knit it. And I think that will make it kind of special, won't it?
Yeah.
So fingers crossed this is going to work out. So these are the two colours that I dyed up. Oh, it's very Lions, isn't it? Season starts, everyone, if you don't know. Everybody who's into American football will know the season starts in the next couple of days, actually, but this coming weekend for us. So I dyed up two skeins, a navy one, and then this one is more of a, you know, brilliant blue, royal blue. And those are the two shades of blue that they said they liked. So the base I've used is a 2-ply. I mean, I'll need to check my Angel hat, the actual hat, I'll be able to tell, but I'm pretty sure it's the same base. Isn't that a lovely colour? So when I dyed these, this is the navy one. It's coming out a bit brighter on screen. Blues are funny, aren't they? I used Jacquard navy blue, and I used that just in its pure form, but I thought it had a slight purplish undertone to it. So I thought, right, okay, I'm going to throw in a different shade of blue as well, just to make sure it comes out a blue. So I put in some sapphire blue, Jacquard, had a look at that and thought, yeah, that's nice, but it was a bit bright then. So the last thing I did was I put in a bit of black and just gave it a wash of black. And this is the colour that has come out, and I think it's lovely. Loads of tones in there. It's going to be really pretty. And then this one, which is the brighter one, for this one I used royal blue from Jacquard. And then I also added in, what did I add in? I added in another blue. Oh no, I didn't. I put in some teal from Jacquard. You can't really tell, but there's actually quite a lot of teal in there. In real life, it does have a slightly greenish, slightly leaning greenish in some areas. You can't really tell from screen. But in any case, they're one of a kinds. I didn't write down the recipe, so I'm going to be knitting 2 angel hats with these. So this afternoon I'm going to get one of these wound up and get it on the needles. So next time I'll be showing you the progress on that. And I just think that'll be a really nice, well, I hope it'll be a nice gift. They might not wear hats.
Oh, they boat.
They own a boat. They've got a narrow boat. They're bound to wear hats, aren't they?
Yeah.
I think they'll wear hats. They seem like the loveliest men. And
Yeah,
I
they are, yeah.
cannot wait to meet them. I'm so excited. We're going to have, it'll probably be coffee and cake or tea and cake first of all. And
Yes,
then
yes.
I think they're going to stay for a takeaway. So anyway, you don't need to know that, do you?
Oh, no, so I was very interested.
You don't need to know. But anyway, let's hope they're not watching. They'll be like, oh, we're going to get a takeaway.
They would be right.
So I'll give you an update on those next time. You never know, I might have a hat finished, might I?
So, I'm also knitting another jumper. It's the Albion. And it's by Michelle Wong. And the pattern's great. And I'm using the Primrose Yarn Company yarn.
Yes.
And everything's lovely. And then, well, it isn't.
It's not.
And I'll tell you why. I don't like casting on new projects because I don't like the first round or 2 because it's tough. It's really hard on the fingers. I'm now quite a few rounds into this, and every round is like the first round. The yarn isn't pleasant to work with. And it's not just me that thinks that.
No, so, I mean, there's something else happened with this project we'll tell you about in a second, but you might remember the story of me getting this yarn. So it's Primrose Yarn Co. And it's the one that's American Targhee Cumbria wool, and it was a collaboration with Brooklyn Tweed. So it's the same base, I believe, as Shelter, Brooklyn Tweed Shelter, except Primrose Yarn Company have dyed it. I don't think I've ever knitted anything out of this, but I've certainly had experience of this yarn. I can't, for the life of me, remember how. But anyway, I knew what this yarn felt like, and I knew that it was really light, and that's what Dan wanted. So we ordered this from America, or I ordered this from America. First of all, the colour wasn't quite as we expected it to be. Anyway, we've spoke all about this, but Dan said, you know what, I'm just going to use it. I'll be honest, I don't like knitting with this base. And the reason I knew that when I ordered it for Dan, but, you know, I don't particularly like knitting Let Lopi, and Dan loves it. You know, we're different, aren't we?
You hate knitting with Let Lopi.
I'm trying to...
Particularly
I'm not trying to be too negative. It's not my favourite, but Dan loves it. So I didn't dismiss it because nobody's the same. What I love knitting, Dan doesn't, and vice versa.
You've got to try it.
You've got to try it. Yeah. So, we took a risk and I ordered it, and yeah, he cast on, and he didn't say anything about the knitting of it to me. You've just been working on it, haven't you?
Yes.
My experience of knitting with this yarn, I didn't find it very pleasant. I didn't like the way it felt. For me, it's got like a very dry handle to it. It's really hard to describe. If you've worked with this base, you'll know what I mean. But
I've never worked with a yarn like it before, and I think it is very interesting.
No, it's very individual.
It's very interesting to compare the ribbing with Let Lopi to the ribbing to this.
Yeah, well, what I noticed yesterday when we went to do the kind of videoing of the projects is that Dan's ribbing is really untidy. And I said to him, I've never seen you knit rib like this before. Oh. There was, ladders on all. Look. Yeah, I mean, it's lovely. Dan's ribbing is generally lovely.
Well, it always is.
It always is.
The ribbon on my sock is perfect.
Yeah, on this one, there's ladders, terrible ladders on all of the purl stitches. And I was like, what is going on with this? So I said, well, I'll just have a little knit on it. So
before
I did that,
she realised I'd twisted the cast on.
Dan's Mobiused his cast on.
Which is hilarious because I managed to cast on the Godey no problem. Yeah. Kay said, it is the knitting gods telling us.
So I don't know if you can see there, can't you?
Kay was correct. The knitting gods have told us this is not the yarn for this project.
No, he's Mobiused it. So
you've ordered me some Cascade 220.
long story short, that's what I've done. But I did knit around on this, a round and a half. I can knit it in a way that will give a neater rib, because the yarn it's not smooth. It doesn't pull through your hands smoothly. And I think the problem with Dan when he's knitting it is you've got to be very deliberate moving from a knit to a purl. You know, when I move from a knit to a purl, generally I subconsciously just give the needle a little tug to bring that yarn fully to the front. Otherwise you end up with a longer strand. And because this isn't a very smooth yarn, it's draggy.
Well, the other thing is...
That's, I think, what was causing it.
I think I was being too gentle with the yarn. I think that I was giving it the respect I perhaps give Lopey.
You were worried about it breaking. It's not. I mean... It
will break by hand.
It will... Yeah, I mean, it will break, but it's not like some of the other Lopies. It's not like the Pletulopi, those plate ones. They just pull apart with a breath of wind.
Lopi would have gone a lot faster than that's gone.
Yes, but it isn't the most robust of yarns, so I think you were being a bit cautious with it as well. But in any case, all of these factors together, you know, when I actually asked you, you know, do you like knitting with it? And you said no, not really.
No, it's awful.
So I said, well, look, what are we doing? And I think sometimes you've just got to see the signs, haven't you? He'd Mobiused it, he wasn't really enjoying it, his ribbing looks really untidy. So I said, look, shall I just order some Cascade 220?
Yes, you should.
And that's what I've done.
But I've been thinking about this, and what I want to do is I'm going to just forget about it for a month or two, but then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cast on, and I'm going to do a 1x1 rib. And see what it I'm going to see what it looks like.
Yeah.
I'm going to see how it feels. And if I can get it to work without it messing with my technique. Because the one thing I'm not going to do is I'm not going to mess with my technique, which works on every yarn I've ever knitted with, just to make this work. Because the worst situation would be... Because, you know, if you mess with your technique here, you will naturally, when you knit your next rib, adopt the same processes. And if that then messes up your other ribbing, there's just no point. There would be a point if lots of yarns behaved like this, but I've never worked with a yarn like it before in my life. But, though, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm going to try 1x1. If I can make it work, I'll knit a more simple pattern with it.
Yeah, yeah. And that's really the end of the story, so... I know, you know, it's disappointing because I obviously spent quite a lot of money on this yarn and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, sometimes you've just got to bite the bullet and just realise that...
Jumper knitters tend to have sweaters worth of yarn in their stash.
Oh, absolutely. You know, we'll just keep it and you never know what will happen. It might turn into something else. But anyway, I also was able to order a colour that you liked better.
So actually, I may end up better off.
So we'll maybe it'll come tomorrow.
There's no may about it. I will end up better off. Don't miss the next episode of the Self-Contained Knitter, because we'll be digging into the yarn, and I'll probably have even casted it on as well.
You will have, yeah. I mean, gosh, honestly, what traumas we've had these past couple of weeks.
Well,
it's not really a trauma, is it? Not really. No. It's a knitting trauma, which aren't really traumas.
Thankfully, I don't get traumatised by my knitting.
Well, I do.
You do.
So I do. You know, because it means a lot to me, so I do sometimes.
It means a lot to me.
I know, but
you're just more tightly wound than I am.
Got to de-stress everybody.
I'll sort you out. Don't worry.
I'm like, right. Last project.
Yes.
This is very exciting, and I've been wanting to show you this project for weeks. So yes, this is a project I'm working on for Sockoween, which is next month now, everybody.
Can you believe it?
Start getting excited for Sockoween. And this is the project that I'm knitting for our kind of Sockoween event this year. But it's in my favourite bag. Oh, Emma, I love this bag. This is by Emma at Moo and Mouse, and I've got a new bag from Emma to show you in Endy Bits. I cannot show you what's inside, but I'm going to show you the bag because it's epic. But yeah, this is my absolute favourite one from Emma. It's this lovely Halloweeny one. And in this project bag, I have got a pair of socks, because obviously it's Sockoween. And what we're doing this year for Sockoween, we're doing it slightly differently. And I am refreshing one of my existing patterns, which is kind of Halloweeny, spookily themed. It's the Incantation Socks, which has been out for quite some time. And funnily, actually, those socks, I'm sure the yarn I used is also from Deb at Fondant Fibre for the Incantation Socks. And she specially dyed it for me for those. I'm certain now I think about it, because the colours were the light colours, blues and sort of lilacs, but it was to mimic the kind of steam rising from a cauldron. But for this pair that I'm knitting now, I'm using a yarn that I bought fairly recently from 3 by the Sea Designs, and I bought it in their kind of, I don't know what they call it, but it's where they put up for sale all of the skeins that are like one of a kinds or trial run skeins, things like that. And this is one of the skeins I bought. And I knew when I saw this colour, I thought this is going to be perfect for Sockoween. So here's the yarn. Isn't it fabulous? It's a mix of like deep purples and like berry reds. It's just gorgeous. Now, this didn't have a name, however, I think this is really similar to a colour that they did do, I think in 2022. I think it was called Mixed Berry Tart. It's really similar, so I do wonder if this was like a trial run for that colour. So I'm knitting a pair of Incantation Socks using this yarn, and we're filming the process.
So basically, Sockoween is a month-long event that started 2 years ago. That was our very first ever Sockoween. And what happened was, all the way through the month, Kay put out videos where you, first of all, you shared your absolute perfection magic loop sock knitting for beginners. Last year, you did DPN's absolute beginner sock knitting. Both of those came with lovely patterns as well. So those, they're already there. The past Sockoween events are already there. So if you're a new sock knitter and you joined us for this year's Sockoween, you're sorted, because you could go and knit those patterns. But if you are an established sock knitter, although, could a beginner knit these socks?
Yes. So the Incantation Socks are, it's based on like a broken rib, but there's an eyelet row in there as well.
Right. So what Kay's going to do is, over the course of the month, she's going to release videos and you're going to knit through the socks with her. She's going to give you all her special hints and tips and everything, so you create the most perfect sock. But you don't have to knit these socks for Sockoween, do you?
No, not at all. No. Knit whatever socks you want for Sockoween, as long as they have a Halloween theme. So it is a knit-along. It's a knit-along. You can knit whatever socks you want. So yeah, Sockoween is a patron event, and any of our patrons can join in. The videos, the tutorial videos that we've just spoken of, they're available to silver and above level of patrons. Yes. But like we said, you don't have to knit these socks at all. The other thing I didn't say is that this pattern, the Incantation pattern, we will be gifting to all of those people. So everyone who can access the tutorials. Yes. Calling them tutorials, though, they're not really tutorials. It's more of a knit-along. It's more of a knit-along. A guided knit-along with the designer of the socks. Yes. Yes. So, I mean, they're not... Although you're going to see me knit through the whole sock in a series of videos, it's not necessarily tutorials. It is more of like a knit-along video series. Yes. Yeah. But look at my stitch marker. Oh, a little ghosty. I think this is from Jules at So Sweet Violet. I can't be sure, but I think it was a little while ago. Got to use my little ghosty. So yeah, very exciting. I'm using double points as well to knit these socks, which is absolutely lovely. And I'm using my favourite Knit Picks Sunstruck. Couldn't think. Knit Picks Sunstruck to knit them. So that's fun as well, I think. Because I do generally do a lot of videos knitting socks where I'm using magic loop. But I say that's my favourite method. I don't know really. I sort of switch between the two, because when I'm using double points, I think that's my favourite. It's going to be stupendous, though. The Sockoweens the last 2 years have been just outstanding. Yeah, really fun, really fun. It's just fun, take part. You know, pull out all of your Halloween themed yarns. You can use whatever yarn you want. It could be self-striping, it could be variegated. It might not even be the yarn, it might be the pattern name that makes you think of Halloween.
And the Sockoween fun really begins this month, because there's some Sockoween elements to the Knitability coming out. That's our magazine coming out on the 12th this month, and then also Kay's putting out a special design diary at the end of this month, right before the series starts in October, where you're going to be talking about refreshing the design itself and all of those things.
And what it will mean, because I'm just doing a pattern refresh as well, I will actually update the pattern on Ravelry. So if you've purchased it in the past on Ravelry, then you will get a notification that I've updated the pattern. The pattern itself hasn't changed. You know, the instructions haven't changed. But what I will tweak is just maybe the layout and the chart. Yeah, there wasn't a chart in it. I'm going to add a chart. I'm just going to bring it up to the kind of level of my patterns now, because this was written, I think, in 2017, I think.
Wow.
So it's a good few years ago.
Cool.
Yeah, so you will get that notification if you bought it on Ravelry. I can't do it on Lovecrafts, unfortunately. I can't do updates like that on Lovecrafts because their technology doesn't allow me to do that. But certainly if you purchased it Ravelry, you will get an update notification.
Cool. Yeah. Who's ready for some more castle action? Oh, yes. We've just got 3 episodes to go before the end of the series, so it's time to get serious. After the glorious reign of Elizabeth I, it's time to welcome a new king. And it's a king with a twist, because he's already the King of Scotland. So let's delve into the story as we watch the next exciting episode of England, a Castle Nation.
Have you ever thought how the world we live in today came to be? Why do so many of us live in houses made from bricks? How do most of us end up in a supermarket every week? How did some of us get the surnames we have? And why even do many modern day jobs exist?
The thing I love the most about history is we can get the answers to all this and so much more. It's always fascinated me when I've looked back through time to try and identify the things which relate to you and me today. And in this series, that's what we're going to do. We're going to try and marry the ancient with the modern. We're going to take a look at the end of the ancient world, a world that our ancestors knew so well. And we're going to tell the story of how it all started to change and become the modern world that you and I live in today.
"1,000 years ago, that is what the majority of England looked like. The houses we lived in were simple wooden structures, and the lives that most of us led were rustic and hard, to say the least. But a change was on the horizon. A technological innovation from the continent was about to burst onto the scene that would completely transform the lives of all of us.
The dawn of the castle had come, and in this series, we're going to tell its story. Where did these gigantic structures come from? Why were they invented? And why were so many built so quickly?
And then it gets really interesting, because how did this medieval structure, reminiscent of the buildings of ancient Rome, come to inspire completely the towns and cities of England, from the houses we live in to the shops we buy from?
Along the way, we're going to tell the story of the kings and queens who unsuspectingly ushered in this change. A change that would lead us on a path to something completely unexpected, to civil war and a republic. This is a truly epic tale that I can't wait to tell you. Welcome to England, a castle nation. Welcome back to England, a castle nation. After our wonderful visit to Barnard Castle over the last 2 episodes, we've moved on to a brand new destination, and this is it. Behind me stands the rather imposing keep of a traditional motte and bailey castle. Over the next 2 episodes, we're going to explore the story of this absolutely wonderful place. This is Bruff Castle, and its history is fascinating. It was built around 1100 AD to safeguard the routes from the north, specifically Scotland. This was wild country right up until the 1700s, and to survive here you needed to be tough, and Bruff Castle is most certainly that. Since the time of the Romans, this land had been fought over. In 80 AD, the Romans had only just properly taken this part of England from a tribe called the Brigantes. Now, 1600 years later, it was the English and the Scots who fought over these fields, but all that was about to change. England had a new king, and this was a monarch with a difference, because he was already King of Scotland. The castles which had been built to protect the border between England and Scotland would now throw their gates open to let people come and go as they pleased. Instead of being 2 peoples, the populations of England and Scotland would become one. This was the foundation stone of Great Britain, and its architect was King James Stuart, son of Mary Queen of Scots, and he arrived in England with a dream. James wanted to be the man who would create a united kingdom. But he loved a party. He had no idea how to budget, and he had a habit of being really quite pretentious. Would he succeed? That's what we've come here to find out. Because would you believe that the owner of this castle would have a front row seat on this fascinating story? Her name was Lady Anne Clifford, and she would live through, I think, one of the most exciting periods in English history. As a young woman, she spent huge amounts of time at the royal court in her capacity as the Countess of Dorset, but she adored castles, and she spent much of her adult life here at Bruff. But as our story begins, Anne Clifford is just a teenager coming of age in the English royal court. She's just witnessed the death of Elizabeth I, and now she will live through and grow with the arrival of James Stuart and his family, his dynasty, as they take control of England and the Great Britain that he's wanting to form. Anne would witness the gunpowder plot. She'd witness the first colonies being settled in America, the English Civil War, and also the English Republic. This is the story that will take us to the end of the series. So whilst that's going to take us 3 episodes, for the next 2 of those episodes we're going to be based right here. But before we get started on what is an absolutely fascinating story, why don't you head off to the castle to learn a little bit more about it. Welcome everyone to the heart of Bruff Castle and its rather imposing keep. Now throughout this series we've discovered how when the Normans arrived here in 1066, and they brought the castle with them of course, that they followed in the footsteps of the Romans, often building in places where the Romans had built before them. But here at Bruff they take things a little bit more literally, because the very first thing that was built on this site was in 80 AD by Gnaeus Agricola, the Roman governor of Britain at that time. He built a fort right here in 80 AD, and for the next 500 years it would be home to a cohort of men, largely from Turkey.
As the Romans conquered the land they called Britannia, a word derived from the ancient word Prytani, meaning painted ones, they built towns and roads. 2 of the biggest in northern England were York and Carlisle. The road they constructed to connect these 2 towns still exists today. Along that road they built forts to house troops that would patrol the surrounding landscape, and this was one of them. Whilst it's difficult to imagine what it would have looked like, we can still see the protective ditch that surrounded the playing card shaped fort, and with a bit of imagination everything becomes a little clearer. Do you see right in the centre of that picture there's a large white building? That is the Commandant's house, home to the man who commanded this fort.
The Commandant's house would now have been pretty much just to my left here. When the fort was built, Scotland didn't actually exist. It was the Romans' arrival and them pushing the Celtic tribes further and further up the country that laid the sort of seeds, the groundwork for the country of Scotland. Scotland itself wasn't born for another 800 years. And then in the years following, this part of the country, it was a battleground, constantly changing hands between the English and the Scottish. When William arrived in 1066 with the castles, he had enough to deal with in the south to sort of come up here and to lay claim to lands which had, gone from one way to the other. It wasn't until his son took charge, William II, that he decided the time had come to take this part of the country back for England permanently, and he did so by building castles just like this one.
What makes Bruff so special is it really hasn't changed much at all since it was first built. That old classic Motte and Bailey design in a challenging landscape just works. Whilst Anne Clifford would turn this castle into a home in its later years, as we explore this wonderful place, we do so knowing its basic layout remains the same today as it did when it was first constructed.
So how did Bruff actually come to be? Well, it all started with the crowning of a new king. The first Norman king of England, William the Conqueror, had died, and as was tradition, he named his heir William as well. And when William took the throne, as kings tended to do at the time, they wanted to do something big and bold and strong to show their people, to show their subjects that they were going to do a good job as king. And William II decided that the right thing to do was to march north to Scotland and take back lands which had been moving from one side to the other for generations. So he came north and he actually took Carlisle, which is just up the road from here. And then he decided to work across the country to create a buffer zone between England and Scotland. And he took back pretty much Cumbria, Northumberland, permanently for the English crown. And in the process of taking the land, he did what the Normans had done since they'd arrived in England. As he conquered an area, he would build a castle. And this was the perfect spot to do it, because there was a Roman fort already here. Granted, it was completely ruined and lots of the stone would have been robbed, but there would have been absolutely tons of quarried stone. And there is, we're going to see it actually in the next episode, Roman stone which has been used in the buildings all around here. So he picked the perfect spot, the stone was already here, and William II built the very first castle at Bruff.
So what did he build? Well, he followed the tried and tested template used to such great effect by his father. At the highest point, he built a keep, the stronghold of the castle, which was guaranteed to see action here on the outer fringes of the Kingdom of England. To the north of the keep was placed the bailey. Its northern wall followed the line of the original Roman fort. Within its enclosure was placed all the things the community would need to survive, even in the event of a siege, which would happen many times here at Bruff. For the first 50 years of its life, it formed part of the king's estate. Once it was established, though, it was granted to its first proper owner, Tybald de Valois.
So what would it have felt like actually arriving at Tybald's court? Well, the first thing I can tell you is this thing is seriously imposing. 900 years on, and it still absolutely commands the landscape around you. This was a building constructed to strike fear and also to control the surrounding area, and let me tell you, it does a spectacular job. The first thing that we would have encountered was the gatehouse. Now, sadly, it's really shrunken today, but once this really imposing building would have stood 3 stories high.
The building we see today was built around 1200 and was a replacement to the original gatehouse. The second floor would have been used as a guard room for the men who manned the gatehouse, but the top floor was a guest room.
Don't be fooled though, this was a building constructed to keep people out. And once there would have been a portcullis and a drawbridge here, just like what we saw at Helmsley earlier on in the series. But if you did make it through the gatehouse, you would have walked out into an absolute hive of activity.
Because the gatehouse leads directly into the main working area of the castle. This was the courtyard. Cobbled today, it takes on much the same feel as it would have done 800 years ago. Laid out against the curtain walls, we would have found a blacksmith looking after weapons and shoeing horses, stable hands moving saddles and feed from storerooms to the stables, and household staff bustling to and from the keep beyond.
Now, as soon as you got into the castle, you would have been drawn to the keep like a moth to a flame. But before we got there, we would have been stunned at the size of the stables. Horses were vital in these times, and a castle on the frontier of England needed a lot of them.
They were, of course, used in battle very effectively, but they were also required for transporting men and goods. The stables were 2 floors originally, with oats and hay stored on the second floor. 800 years ago, this space would have been sectioned off into stalls, each containing a horse, maybe munching on some hay or being reshoed by a blacksmith.
As we leave the stables behind, we would have found our eyes drawn upwards to the keep, standing 4 stories high. And not only does it dominate the castle, but it also dominates the surrounding countryside as well.
The keep was never intended to be beautiful, although with its 4 corner turrets, it does a pretty good job. The entrance to the keep was originally here on the second floor. A stone staircase led up here from a long disappeared forebuilding, which was an extra obstacle to any attackers trying to get in.
Now this is the basement of the keep, and it was very much a storeroom. But there is something really interesting to see, because would you believe that on the walls of this basement there's actually plaster, and it's original. I'll show you.
And here it is, 850-year-old plaster. Why was this applied to a storeroom? It actually improved the hygiene in the area that could at times be used for food storage, but it also reflected light. This would have been a dark space, so little tricks like this helped the men and women who kept this castle running to do their jobs well.
Now, a spiral staircase once actually linked the basement to the floors above. And if you're wondering what the other floors were used for, well, let's take a look and I'll show you.
The second floor level would have served as a private hall for honoured guests. We can see in the walls fireplaces and cupboards, which once would have served the household. The third floor were bedrooms for the lord of the castle in the event of a siege, and the fourth floor was used by the guards manning the battlements at the top of the castle.
For 500 years, the castle regularly changed hands between the English and Scots. The Scots would come and besiege it, they'd take the castle, but it was just in too prominent a place, it was too important a castle for the English not to come and try and take it back. So it would move from one side until the other. Now, by 1523, it had passed into the hands of the Clifford family. And even when a Christmas party got completely out of hand and all the wood within the castle all burnt down and burnt away, I mean, that must have been quite some Christmas party, mustn't it? The castle was even rebuilt and it lived on. But everything changed for the castle in 1603. With the death of Elizabeth I, suddenly Scotland and England weren't two separate countries anymore, or at least that was the plan. They were one. And castles like this, they weren't really needed. And this was all empowered by the arrival of Elizabeth I's elusive heir, the brand new King of England. So who was he? I think we should go and find out.
The man who inspired the formation of Great Britain was King James VI of Scotland, son of Mary Queen of Scots and her murdered husband Henry Stuart. Late one spring night in 1603, he received a visitor from England who proclaimed him King of England and Scotland. But how did he get here? With his mother ostracised from Scotland, he was crowned king aged just 1 and raised by his uncle here at Stirling Castle, with his uncle serving as king till James came of age. He made his first public appearance aged 5, but witnessed his own grandfather's murder that same year. It served as a touchstone for his life, with James always striving to avoid violence. James came of age at 13 and was formally crowned at Edinburgh. Not long afterward, Esme Stuart arrived in Scotland with a plan to rise through the ranks. He did this by taking advantage of the young James. They began an intimate relationship. What didn't help was Esme was 25 years older than James and his cousin, but his plan worked perfectly. In just a few weeks, he was raised to the highest ranks in Scotland. As a king, James would delight in making sarcastic comments, knowing recipients would not dare respond in kind. He had a wicked sense of humour and a huge opinion of himself. As James grew into a man, he was not lonely, but he had no real family. This led him to crave a perfect family environment for his own. He found that family with his marriage to Anna of Denmark. They met in the days before their wedding, which took place here in Oslo. James burst into her room in a very similar way to what Henry VIII had done with Anne of Cleves decades before. James also tried to kiss his betrothed, to which Anna refused. But unlike his petulant relation, James turned on the charm, and within minutes, he got his kiss. As the years progressed, it became clear to James and Anna that their marriage would never be one of romantic love. James craved a submissive wife, but instead he'd married a powerful woman who would fight for what she believed in. What held them together was the promise of a greater prize, the Kingdom of England. Anna had also provided James with something that he'd always craved, and that was a family. By 1603, they had 2 sons and 2 daughters. And now the thing which had always been their goal, for him to become the King of England, it was finally within their grasp. What would the future hold? Would it be dramatic? It most certainly would be. And when we come back in part 2, we're going to delve right into the story. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later on in the show for more England, a Castle Nation.
Now that's what I call a castle. What about that Roman fort?
I know.
Oh, I mean, just classic. I mean, I cannot think of a castle I've been to like that.
No.
Not where it's so obvious.
It's a lot different, that castle, isn't it, to the ones you've been to
Completely
before.
different.
Yeah.
It's very much... I mean, if you were, say, to take Richmond Castle, which we went to in the first episode in the series, and we might just be going back in the final episode, that is the only one that's slightly similar. Because you've got the traditional Motte and Bailey with the square.
I think
tower.
it just looks so different because it's cobbled rather than grassed.
I know.
And of course they wouldn't be grassed in
They
the
certainly
middle.
would not be. No.
So you sort of forget that they wouldn't be grassed like they tend to be now.
Yeah. The one thing about that place is it's tough on the old feet.
Yeah, I bet.
Because it's also very slopey.
Right.
So there's no flat
Gosh,
bits.
is it really?
Yeah. You're like always like walking.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
You would think they'd build it on a level.
No. So, what a great start.
Yes.
And what a fascinating character. But still so much more to come. Because, yes, gunpowder plot and foundation of the very first colonies in America. And, oh, my goodness, just like beyond exciting.
Yeah.
We have, though, 2 spectacular, and I mean spectacular, finished objects to show you.
We do.
So, without further ado, Kay Jones should say...
Dan Jones.
Yes.
What's off your needles?
Yes, he's actually finished something.
Can I just say something before, actually?
Yes.
That third project I showed was a new cast
Oh,
on.
thank you very much, Cora. What was the third project again?
The socks, the incantation socks.
Yes.
They were a new cast on.
Amazing. So, what is my finished object? Well, it is the Winter at Pemberley Cow.
Yes, it is.
Oh, and Kay designed this for me.
It's all finished.
As a special present. And it's been so popular with all of you lovely people, it's going to be released next year as a platinum pattern.
Yes, it is.
Which is rather wonderful. And I knitted this using Regia Merino yak.
Yeah.
And it is just the most beautiful 2-colour,
I could put it on.
gorgeous
Put it on and show you. Look at that. It's all blocked now.
cow. And we've actually filmed a special tutorial, just a general tutorial,
yeah.
which will be coming out next month.
Yeah.
Which is all about... Oh, no, in fact, I can't remember. I think it's November. They'll be coming out in November. So it's a colourwork blocking tutorial.
Yes, I blocked this and we filmed
Yes.
the blocking.
You already
and
have,
chatting. And
a series of blocking tutorials out there. And we've not done colourwork blocking, so we've added that now.
I've got a necklace on, so I'm just trying to be careful.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. I mean, maybe don't.
No, I am. I
woohoo.
just wanted to avoid the hair, the lipstick and the necklace.
Oh, it looks gorgeous.
Oh, it's lovely.
Oh, you look lovely on walks. Perfection.
Cosy. I love it.
It was a
How
wonderful
nice
knit,
it
an
is.
absolutely gorgeous
Now
thing.
you don't see any slightly dodgy colour work now, do you?
Hey, hold on.
It's
That's a bit
great. I
much.
love it. Oh, I kind of want to keep it on, but I'll get a bit warm. It's really nice, look. Isn't it lovely?
Yes. So thoroughly
Perfect.
enjoyed.
Perfect.
Thoroughly enjoyed knitting that. It's a great
I
project.
can get my face right in it.
Yes.
which I like with a cowl. It's beautiful.
Especially on cold days.
Yeah.
So yes, that is the winter at Pemberley. Loved every minute and looking forward to doing, I think now, the Sweetheart Cowl again.
Oh, right, yes.
Yeah.
I need to find some yarn for that. You said you were going to use the orange yarn, but yeah,
yes.
let's find another.
Yeah, definitely.
Beautiful job. Well done.
Now it's time for me to ask, because this really is quite exciting. Kay Jones, what's off your needles?
Right, so I have a finished pair of socks. And these socks you will recognise, these are a design pair of socks.
I mean,
And
look at the
these
sparklies.
Gorgeous lace socks. All finished now. And in fact, they are almost through testing. So I'm just waiting on the last bit of testing to come back. And then I'll be getting this pattern released. So this pattern is called the Frosted Socks.
Woohoo!
Because the pattern just made me think of, you know, the kind of feathery patterns that Frost makes on a window pane. Oh, and it just, and the colour of the yarn as well just enhanced that, I think. So these are the Frosted Socks. So excited. So I would imagine that they'll certainly be getting released within the next 2 weeks.
Right,
so
wow.
on the next show, I'll be able to tell you that this pattern is now available. I'm sure of that. At what point in the next 2 weeks, I'm not certain, but sometime in the next 2 weeks. I'll put it on my Instagram. You know, if you're one of our patrons, I'll post in our Facebook group to let you know. But
what's so cool about
definitely on
these-
the next show, I'll be telling you that these are available.
I think what's cool about these socks is that this is a pattern which you said it's taken you a long time to be able to bring to fruition.
Yeah, and
You've aspired to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had feedback from 2 of my testers, and you know, both ladies have really enjoyed knitting it and said that the pattern was really intuitive, really sort of memorisable, and yeah, super pretty. One of my testers actually knit a pair for her granddaughter. Oh, and the colours that she's used, they are the prettiest pair of socks. She's used like a bright pink for the heels and toes, and then like a speckled for the, you know, similar to this, but in sort of pink shades, and just really sugary, gorgeous little girl socks. They're absolutely beautiful. And my other tester that I've seen so far used a gorgeous skein of Malabrigo Ultimate Sock in Frank Ochre. Do you know that golden colour? And they also look absolutely fabulous. So it's just been a joy seeing the different versions as well, and what it looks like in different yarns. So this pattern, if I stretch it out, you'll be able to see it's actually based on a rib. And it was deliberate, because I know that with lace patterns generally, if it's an all-over lace sock, you can find that they become baggy, you know, because lace stretches so much. So I thought in an effort to kind of counteract that, if we base it on a rib, you're going to get that kind of bounce back. And, you know, I've had these on my feet and they certainly fit really well. So I hope that is also a really lovely element to them. There's a tutorial in the pattern showing how to knit the lace. It's not difficult. If you've never knit a pair of lace socks before, you could definitely knit these. It just uses basic stitches. Really, you know, straightforward. But like I say, I have included that tutorial. And I've also put in a little sort of design tweak so that you get symmetrical sides to your instep. I didn't quite know how to say that, because on one side it ends here with a purl stitch, so you get a really nice border, but that doesn't naturally happen on the other side. But we've made it happen by just doing a little tweak to the pattern, and you also get it on the other side, so it's nice and symmetrical as well, which is very satisfying.
Cool.
So the yarn I dyed myself. I've got a little bit left over, so that's lovely. So the speckled was the Yarny Book Club from last time. It was the Christmas holiday, and it's just worked perfectly, I think. So I'm thrilled with these. I'm really looking forward to getting the Frosted Socks released.
Right, it's time to get back to Bruff to finish off the story
Yes.
of James I. So if you're ready for some gunpowder plot,
I am.
and some colonies and all sorts of wonderful things. So let's get back for more England, a castle nation. Welcome back to England, a castle nation. We've made our way down onto Swindale Beck. This is the river which formed through erosion that natural vantage point that was selected by the Romans to build their fort, and then of course chosen by William II to build his castle. So it's really thanks to this little river that the castle's there, and in turn the village that now surrounds it. But the year is now 1603, and a new king has just taken the throne of England. And you have to wonder what the people of Bruff thought, because they'd been brought up to fear the kings of Scotland, and now suddenly the King of Scotland was the King of England as well. And the people of Bruff had a unique vantage point because they were right on that border. As we've already learnt in the episode, at times they were even in Scotland. So you have to wonder, how on earth did they react? To find out more, why don't we take a walk along this gorgeous river?
Already in this series, we've learnt a lot about the people who lived through these fascinating times. From the way they dressed to what they ate, from the names they had to some of the jobs they did. But out here in the countryside, where 90% of the population worked, the job most men undertook, 80% of them actually, was that of the ploughman. It was extremely physical work and needed all year round. Modern ploughing happens maybe once a year, thanks to the pipes laid under the fields, stopping crops becoming waterlogged. As the 17th century dawned, this was achieved by planting in regularly ploughed ridges, with the accompanying furrows draining away any excess water. We can see evidence of 17th century ridge and furrow ploughing below.
Also, there was no weed killer, so the plough did the job for them. The trick was to plough wide and really deep. That way you turned over the weed and the root so it got no sun, and so it just died. If the weeds were really bad, then you just ploughed again in the other direction. This was, of course, hot, sweaty and dirty work. And it's easy to sort of perceive the world in the way that we live today. So it would make sense that after a day out, ploughing your ridges and furrows, that you would head home and wash yourself with hot soapy water, because surely that is the way that we've always done it. Well, you couldn't actually be more wrong.
As King James took the throne, it was seen as complete stupidity to wash yourself with hot soapy water. It was believed that the diseases of the day entered your body through open pores, so people were encouraged to keep themselves covered up the majority of the time. Hands and face were to be rinsed regularly, but in plain cold water. The best way to keep clean was to wear underwear that covered up as much as possible, and then to change it as often as possible. You would think that most people would then smell a little bit, but tests have been done that's proved this is not the case. The key to smelling good and feeling good appears to be the clean clothes. So whilst the Tudor approach to hygiene is somewhat different to ours, it did at least work.
Good oral hygiene was an absolutely vital part of 17th century life, but they didn't have toothbrushes and they didn't have toothpaste. Most people would clean their teeth using a cloth, and they would actually rub their teeth with soot. Now, the soot was an absolutely brilliant soft abrasive, and it deodorized a little too.
And the way that they collected it was they would take a candle, they would hold it up against an earthenware pot, and the soot would form on the pot. They'd then rub it off with their handkerchief, and away you'd go, ready for some clean teeth. But the year is now 1603, and England has a new king. And when we left him, he'd just been informed that the crown was his. But for James to successfully claim the throne, he would need to get to London as fast as he could. And the problem was, when he found out, he was about 100 miles north of here, in Edinburgh, in the Scottish capital. And the route to London was not going to be easy at all. The man who had empowered the arrival of James Stuart was Robert Cecil, son of Elizabeth I's chief advisor William. Whilst there was much excitement around a new monarch after Elizabeth I's long reign, this would be no easy transition. That spring, James and Anna made a final appearance on the streets of Edinburgh before the king departed for London. They would travel separately. The story told was Anna's ladies-in-waiting needed time to prepare. The real truth was there'd probably be armed resistance to James, specifically in the north of England. But as the journey progressed, all seemed to be going well. The king stopped at all the important houses of England en route to his capital, in the hope being visible would endear himself to his new subjects. At York he lodged at King's Manor, as his great-uncle Henry VIII had done before him. At Hinchingbrook he stayed with the Cromwell family. They were descended from Henry VIII's chief advisor Thomas. This was a house with foreboding connotations for the future, even though James wouldn't know it at the time. Finally, the king arrived in London. Whilst the large crowds who'd flocked to see him made him anxious, he'd successfully avoided conflict in his triumphant progress through his new kingdom. What would James do about Scotland? Neglect it. He'd realised his dream, and he would rule the new Great Britain from its capital in London. Only time would tell how realistic a dream this was. Finally, Anna made her way to London with her family in tow. The only one who didn't come was little Prince Charles, who would continue his upbringing in Scotland for just a few months longer. As Anna travelled down the country, ladies joined her very much as they had done James. And one of those ladies was Anne Clifford, whose family now owned the castle at Bruff. By 1603, the family was reunited in London, and whilst James was thrilled to see his family, right at that moment, the plots which had been suspected, the little rumblings at a Scottish king taking power, they'd started to be uncovered. Those plots actually ran a little bit deeper than people expected, and this would be the start of things to come for the reign of the first Stuart king. As the year 1604 dawned, the new royal family was settling into life in their new kingdom. Anna was cherishing her new role, and James would disappear for days on end with young male courtiers. Whilst he absolutely loved his wife and doted on his family, he was returning to the passions of his youth. In matters of religion, he tried to hold a middle ground similar to Elizabeth. Where James differed was he would regularly debate with all elements of the religious community. Like all great leaders, he hoped to bring people together. Sadly, it failed to satisfy the extremists on all sides of the argument. The question was, which side would break first? And the answer came in 1605. It was early November when a loyal member of Parliament called Baron Monteagle received a letter telling him to stay away from the opening of Parliament because a great blow would strike the men assembled there. He was a loyal subject, and so he passed the letter on to the authorities. And when the letter got in front of James, he interpreted that, correctly as it happened, that gunpowder would be used to blow him and his parliament up. It was a chilling threat when you consider the same fate had been suffered by his father.
A search was conducted of the Parliament buildings, and hidden in an underused undercroft was found Guido Fawkes, a handsome man with vast military experience. He was tall, red-haired, and had a fantastic moustache. Under interrogation from Robert Cecil, he gave the name John Johnson when asked. Cecil did not believe him and immediately got to the truth, so fast in fact that historians today agree he probably already knew about the plot. He was just waiting for it to unfold. Guido Fawkes had been brought up here in York as a Protestant, but after the death of his father, he converted to Catholicism. King James's constant talk with all sides of the religious argument had led Guido, or Guy as we know him today, to believe the king spoke a good game but delivered nothing. Action needed to be taken, and so it was. Barrels of gunpowder were placed under Westminster Palace, and when Parliament sat with the king in place, Fawkes would have set them off. When asked why, he stated plainly it was to blow the Scottish beggars back to the mountains they came from. Fawkes and all his conspirators were executed. It was known then as the Powder Treason. Today we call it the Gunpowder Plot, and it inspired the long-running tradition in the United Kingdom of Bonfire Night.
Whilst the plot was absolutely terrifying for the royal family, it actually gave them a renaissance of sorts, because suddenly there was an outpouring of public goodwill. The issues had arisen because James spent with absolute abandon. He lived life to the full, he drank excessively, and it was rubbing people up the wrong way. But suddenly, everyone thought he was pretty great. And so he could move forward with a plan he'd been toying with. He formed the Plymouth Company, and he sent them to the Americas to form one of the very first colonies. This they did, and they named it Jamestown in honour of the king. What James needed now was a public relations triumph to show that he was a world leader operating successfully on a world stage. And so he invited his brother-in-law for a visit. Now, his brother-in-law just happened to be the King of Denmark. And when word started to spread that a royal visit was happening from another country, which was a very rare thing in these times, excitement was absolutely huge across all the royal palaces and all the cities of England. So how would this royal visit go? Would it be a success or would it be a failure? Let's get back to Bruff Castle to find out what happened. It was July the 18th when King Christian arrived in England, and his first port of call was a visit with his sister, Queen Anna. Now, the reason why he wanted to see her first was because Queen Anna was recovering from another lost child. Unfortunately, Princess Sophia had died not long after she'd actually given birth. This was a very common occurrence at the time. Now, Queen Anna would have welcomed King Christian. She was staying at Greenwich Palace, and she would have welcomed him into the Great Hall, very much like the one that we're walking through here. So, entertaining his brother-in-law on his own, King James was taking great pleasure in being brash and rude. Drinking to excess and revelling in drunken parties with his brother-in-law, the English court was living up to its decadent reputation. For the next 3 weeks, James and Christian hunted through the day and partied at night.
When Christian came to leave in mid-August, of course another party was held on his ship. All of the royal family attended and gifts were exchanged. But when the moment came for the party to end, the English Lord High Admiral attempted to let Christian know it was time to go. Now, the departure time was scheduled for 2 p.m, but Christian didn't speak much English and the Lord High Admiral spoke no Danish. In his attempt to let him know the time, he held up 2 fingers, to which King Christian took great offence. It didn't help that James thought this was hilarious. This was a family drama that would rumble on for months. For the nobles of England, there was a bright light on the horizon. It was King James's firstborn son, Prince Henry. He had the makings of a strong and inspirational leader, and he was going to be the future king. James had a plan, though. He was going to arrange a marriage that paid him the best dowry possible and then pocket it all for himself. Sadly for James, he would run out of time with his son and heir before he knew it. The 18-year-old prince became sick with typhoid and died quite suddenly. The great hope for the future was gone, and Anna and James were heartbroken. Tragic echoes resonated through the years because the same thing had happened at the dawn of the Tudor era when Prince Arthur had died, opening the door for the tragedy of Henry VIII. No one could have possibly guessed then that King James's second son, Charles, would lead the Stuart dynasty to infamy and destruction. And the question arises, if everything had been so rosy and looked so good in the reign of Elizabeth I, where did it all go wrong for the Stuarts? Well, the problem seems to have initially begun in James I's inability to spend. He spent with an absolute abandon, where Elizabeth would look to save and scrimp and absolutely look after her money. James did the complete opposite. He was a king, and by goodness, he was going to live like one. And the second problem was, where Elizabeth promoted talent and ability, James promoted the best looking. The ones that he liked the look of the most would get the best jobs, and it didn't matter if they were absolutely useless at the job he had in mind for them. But the moment where things really started to turn and go wrong for James was right at this point, because the king had fallen in love. James set out into a relationship which was a replay of his own relationship with Esme Stuart so many years before. This time, though, he was the older man. So who was the king's first true love? It was a 20-year-old man from the Scottish borders called Robert Carr. He'd been a page at the Scottish royal court, and he now found himself in London. James was infatuated, and he showered him with kisses, publicly of course, and raised him and his friends to the highest ranks in the land. The problem was, Robert was not exemplary in any way. He was a very normal, ambitious young man who would do anything to get ahead. This he had done, and now he grew increasingly arrogant. By 1614, Robert Carr held the highest position in the royal household. He was Lord Chancellor. This was the moment he decided to move on. He'd never been in love with James. It was just court life in his eyes. Now he had what he wanted. He took a wife, and the royal romance was over. In the eyes of most of the country, this whole episode epitomised the phenomenon of the over-promoted Scot whose relationship with the king was a scandal and the cause of a moral decay infecting the whole royal court. The cancer which would destroy the monarchy had started to grow.
was actually a silver lining on the horizon for King James, because a new man had come into his life. His name was George Villiers, and it turned out he was a genuinely lovely guy. He sought Queen Anne's approval, and he had genuine love and affection for James. He wanted to learn the art of statesmanship from a master, from the King of England. And to reward George for his love, King James made him Master of the Horse.
As the years progressed, time did actually bring the King and Queen close. As middle age came to both, they found a new appreciation for their relationship. Through so much, they'd always been there for each other. By 1616, though, age was starting to catch up with both of them. Anna had provided everything James could have hoped for with a family. She'd even given him 7 children. That, though, had taken a toll on her body, and as such, the years would now be short for her.
Christmas that year was one for the books. It saw Princess Pocahontas and her husband John Rolfe as guests at court, and the whole royal family loved the occasion. It must have been an interesting thing to experience, given the fact that just 10 years before, it was James and his family who had sent the first colonists out to America. This, though, turned out to be one of the last great family occasions for James and his family.
Over the next 2 years, Anna suffered more and more with illness, and James began to neglect her. That was not the case, though, for her son Charles, who was by her side throughout. By December 1618, Anna was gravely ill. As the new year dawned, Anna's doctor advised her to saw wood to improve her blood flow. The exertion did, of course, make her condition worse. Anna died on March the 2nd, 1619. She was just 44 years old. The cause of death was registered as dropsy, which was extremely common at the time.
Anna's death struck James tremendously hard, and for the rest of his life, he would follow a very similar path to Anna's, constantly suffering with different bouts of illness. As the king became more infirm, it was his true love, George Villiers, who took a leading role now in guiding the country forward, and he became Prince Charles's best friend. Over the next few years, James's arthritis got worse and worse. He suffered terribly with kidney stones and permanently with gout. By 1625, he'd lost most of his teeth and was drinking excessively. His way of life finally caught up with him for good. Because with George by his side, that year, that Easter in fact, James died.
The man who had brought together the thrones of England and Scotland, and who had come to London with a dream of a united kingdom, was gone. What legacy would he now leave this Great Britain that he had always aspired to lead? Would it be one of glory and lasting success, or one of death and complete disaster?
King James had, in essence, laid the groundwork for the country that I live in today, but he'd also set in motion a chain of events that would bring to an end not just the monarchy, but also bring down the buildings which they'd lived in and used since the time of William the Conqueror to control the country. Yes, this is the start of the story which will see us bring an end to the age of the castles. And we'll really dig into that story when I see you next time. So for now, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time for more England, a Castle Nation.
What a story! Oh my goodness. I thought when this season began of England, a Castle Nation, that my favourite parts to the whole series would be the Tudors. Well, I can tell you absolutely it's not. It's this. It's this episode, it's the next episode, and maybe the final episode too. And I think it's because whilst I knew a little bit about this, I didn't know anywhere near as much as what I did about the Tudors. Been reading about the Tudors, as I think lots of people have. There's so much focus on Elizabeth and Henry that you just forget about some of these other people. And I think what it is about James is I found him so relatable. He felt like the first sort of modern royal. And his son is very similar, who we'll be getting into next time. So yes, Castle Nation is back next month because next time Kay is back to finish off her season of the Yarny Book Club.
Yes.
So it's the final book. I wonder what the book will be.
It's the final book. I've already trialled the colour and I've got the hard copy book and it's all looking beautiful.
I didn't know they did Tiddler in hard copies.
Dan's obsessed with
Wouldn't that be
Tiddler.
so cool?
When Bryony was little, he always used to read Tiddler to Bryony, which is a Julia Donaldson book. And we've still got it upstairs. She's got a few of her, little girl books. But you loved that story, didn't you? I think you can relay it word for word.
Yeah, I think I can.
Yeah.
Definitely worth a read if you fancy a good book. Bit of Tiddler on an evening, can't go wrong.
Yes.
Look, it's time for the Endy Bits.
Endy Bits.
Now, there has already been a recent release of a sock pattern. Yes, the waffle socks came out on the 1st of this month. It is not the final Platinum Collection pattern of the year because, as we said last time, the final pattern of this year is going to be this year's Christmas design.
Yes.
So yes, the 4th pattern of 5 this year, the waffle socks, now available, and also Kay's just released a design diary all about it. So you can find out all about the design process, how it came about, and then if you really enjoy it, you can also get the pattern too.
You can, absolutely.
Oh, yes. Available to our
Some people
gold
have already
and
cast
platinum
on, I've
page.
noticed, in our Facebook group.
Yes,
so that's
absolutely.
lovely to see.
Yes.
Yeah.
Already mentioned the next issue of Knitability out on the 12th. Don't miss that.
Oh, it's all spooky and lovely.
Oh, yes. But Kay has some lovely things to show you.
I do. So I mentioned I'd got a new bag from Emma recently. Now, I'm not going to show you what's in the bag because it is the aforementioned Advent design. Can't show you that. But I wanted a special bag to keep this design in and to use through the kind of filming of the whole of Advent and all of that goodness. So, of course, I went to Emma at Moo and Mouse and asked her if she could make me a bag. Could I custom order a bag? And thankfully, she was happy to do that. But I wanted one that was slightly bigger than the normal sort of small patchwork bags that I've got from her previously. So that's what she's done. And I told her what colours I wanted. I actually showed her the Advent yarn. Shh, she's going to keep it secret. And she sort of chose the colours and made me a patchwork bag, and it's fantastic. So it's like a glorious, massive Christmas pudding. That's what I think it's like, Emma.
You need to be careful. Don't say anything because you don't want to give anything away. But
I'm not going to give.
I know, right, that there are people out there who are looking at this bag and trying to work out what's in it.
I'm not going to tell you.
Well, no, of course not. But you know as well as I do. I can think of some names. I won't name names, but I can think of names of people who will now be like hypothesising.
What's inside the bag?
Yes.
I don't know. Nobody knows what's in this bag apart from you.
Yeah.
I literally have told no one what's in this bag apart from Dan, so that's exciting. But look at the bag. It's massive. it's like, the bottom is as big as my head. I love it. And I think she did say that she will be planning on using this size of a bag because she designed it for me, but I think she's going to start putting this bag, this size, in her shop. And it's just fantastic. Look at all the beautiful festive fabrics. It's gorgeous. And it's, I'm not going to show you what's inside, but I mean, that shows you how big it is. Perfect, like, garment size. Absolutely, you could get a garment in this. It's just fantastic. So thank you, Emma, for doing it. She did it me so quick as well. So I was able to use it in some photography as well, which was really lovely. So fantastic bag. A very exciting project in there. So the other thing I've got to say is Do you know how on the last show I was asking you all for your recommendations on self-striping Halloween-themed yarns? Well, you all came up absolute trumps and suggested loads of different shops to me, and quite a few people, and I don't know why I didn't think of this because I've bought from her before and I know her yarn is fantastic, but quite a few people mentioned Polka Dot Creek had got a whole sort of Halloween shop thing going. So I thought, right, I'm going to go and look, and of course there was loads, so I bought a bunch. I bought loads of Halloween yarns, and the good thing about Shelley is that she does like a sock set. I've got them here, the ones that I bought. I may have bought 5. Don't tell anybody. Well, I'm telling you all, aren't I? But yeah, I couldn't resist. I just kept putting them in my cart because the sock sets that she does, I think you have to buy 2 sets if you want 100 grams, but she does 70 gram sock sets, which is plenty for a pair of socks for me and Bryony. Absolutely plenty. And it's obviously a more economical way of doing it. And the other great thing is that Polka Dot Creek is in Canada. That means, in my experience, it comes much quicker in the post. This took a week door to door from Canada. If I order from America, it seems to take a lot longer. So it must just be the differences in the postal systems. So anyway, I got 5 sets. So I got, this first one is called Slimy. And it's like greens and neony greens and purples. So fun. I then got Hocus Pocus. Got to have a bit of Hocus Pocus. Isn't that one lovely? I've then got Wool Witches. Oh, got to have that one with pink. Stripes are orange and pink and green and black. And Witches Britches. Fantastic name. That is so Halloweeny, isn't it? And I love this magenta contrast. And then the final one is the one that Bryony chose for me to cast on, actually. And it's Black Flame Candle, which is a Hocus Pocus reference, isn't it? And that's this one, which is very typically oranges and golds and blacks with this deep purple mini. And Bryony wants a pair of fairground socks. Of course she does. She's only got 1 million pairs. So I'm going to be winding this up as well this afternoon and getting these on the needles. And we'll see how many of these I can get through during Sockoween. But this is the first one that I'm starting with. So fantastic yarn. Came in a week. You know, brilliant price. And she added me in an amazing little, well, it's more than a little extra. But I'm going to keep that as a surprise because I'm going to be knitting it in October and I'll talk about it then.
Cool.
So,
folks, thank you so much for watching. What a show it's been.
So excited for Sockoween.
We will be back in 2 weeks with a brand new episode and it'll be featuring a very special final episode of the Yarny Book Club.
Yes.
So thanks so much for watching and we'll see you then.
Thanks everybody. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Sitting and knitting, Stan and Kay, the bakery bears. Enthusiasm's not quitting, Stan and Kay, the bakery bears. They'll take you to fabulous places of which their favorites they'll share. You better buy a pattern and get yourself a bakery bear. You'll find yourself in a castle while watching the bakery bears. It never feels like a hassle to sit and watch the bakery bears. What's on your shelf or what's in your oven, or maybe a shawl you'll want to wear. So sit yourself right down and